Well, so how do you like it? Lots of Americans awoke from the last election to get their first taste of non-representative government. Donald Trump lost the popular vote by almost 3 million votes, remember. The Electoral College unfairly privileges some states over others, we've been reminded. Worse, in government now are people who oppose government. And they're set on reversing regulations, rolling back the social functions of the state to the detriment of the poor and the benefit of the powerful, especially corporations. It's all propped up by brutality and a fervent populism. None of any of this comes as a surprise to people in the U.S. South. Southern progressives, LGBTQ people, and people of color in the South especially have been living this reality for decades. Our guest today has some insight into what Southern resilience and action can look like in the age of Trump and what the rest of us have to learn from the South. Cazembe Murphy Jackson works with Black Lives Matter Atlanta and as the national organizer for the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which for more than 30 years has been working across movements to end systemic oppression. Cazembe, welcome to the program. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So is that fair to say that you in the South woke up and sort of same old, same old?
I think that's partly true. I think when we woke up and we realized that Trump was in office, part of it was like, okay, this is something that we've been dealing with. We call it the new Confederacy. We've been dealing with this kind of action for a while. But also there was a sense of urgency and responsibility that we were going to actually be called into action to lead other folks who were not in the South about how to deal with this same kind of administration.
So when you talk about you've been dealing with some of these phenomena over the years, what do you mean? How do you describe it?
I think on a state level in particular, you know, we are used to really repressive kind of legislation. We have a lot of in particular in Tennessee and in Georgia, Mississippi, we have supermajority Republican legislatures that typically pass, you know, laws that are aggressive against queer and trans people, bathroom bills, that kind of stuff. In Tennessee, you know, there were bills of things where they didn't even want students to be able to say the word gay in school, but also against, like, you know, living wages, and most states are right to work states, so we can't really form unions and stuff.
Medicaid expansion.
Exactly. all of these kinds of things on a state level. And so we knew it would be a little different going to a federal kind of level, but I don't know that any of us were actually prepared for the extent that of things that's happening right now.
So how much patience do you have with Northerners going, oh my gosh, panic, panic?
You know, I think there is a level of patience, because at the end of the day, in order for us to actually be successful in the resistance, we have got to kind of be open to folks who have different levels of experience with this kind of repression. And so I think I'm learning to be more patient.
Well, that's very kind of you. I think about it as a media problem in the sense that our media has so refused to cover the South that during the period of the Obama administration, the 2008 election, you would have thought everything in the whole country had gone Democratic. Right. Not so.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, and so I agree with that.
So being Southern kind of gives you an edge? Being a Southern progressive kind of gives you an edge? Being a queer, trans, LGBT activist of color gives you an edge looking into all of this. How so? And tell us a little bit about your life.
I would be remiss to not add into that kind of description also like a missionary Baptist. And so, like, kind of adding all of those things in, it's like I come out of a tradition of storytelling, testifying, kind of singing, and really building genuine relationships with people. And I think that is the thing that has really informed the way I organize, but also the way that we organize in the South. Even when we go back to thinking in, like, the civil rights movement, like one of the reasons that the bus boycotts were able to be so successful is because people had built genuine relationships with one another, so they knew who needed a ride.
Now, go a little deeper into that. Is that simply a strategic choice, a tactical choice, or is that really because your lives depend upon it?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think it is a strategic choice in that how can I expect for you to resist, especially as the repression gets more intense? How can I trust that you will actually fight for our interest if I don't actually know you. So strategically it makes sense. But then I think also it's a very Southern, it's a very Black, it's a very Baptist thing to do, to share meals, to help raise our kids together, to help really get to know each other and spend time outside of our organizing work also, so that we just really have these genuine relationships.
I know also in the trans and LGBT movement, the whole idea of coming out, that connecting with people, knowing people is how we do our politics, or how we emerge as full people.
Yeah, especially when I think about the South, I live in Atlanta, but like I think about the smaller rural towns in the South, in particular because isolation is a real thing when we talk about queer and trans folks in particular. And Southerners on New Ground in the beginning was really good about making sure that queer and trans folks had a community.
Tell us a little bit about how your gender identity has changed over time and how it relates, or does it relate, to your socialist identity? How does one inform the other?
Yeah, I definitely think that they're all related. And I think the part that is the most related is why it took so long for me to actually be brave enough to explore my gender. I think that, capitalism, patriarchy, all of these things have us lined up in these very restricted boxes that make sense because it's easier to dominate people in these boxes. For me, I'm from Texas, and I lived most of my life as this tomboy wearing Doc Martens with dresses, and driving my parents crazy. Because they wanted me to pick a lane, which was, get a perm, straighten your hair, wear nice dresses, and a face full of makeup. And for sometimes I did. And so I've always kind of been at this intersection of boy and girl, man and woman. And a lot of the times I call myself mixed gender. But it makes sense for people who don't have a deep understanding of gender identity for me to continue to identify as a trans man, because they get it and they understand why my pronouns need to be he when I say trans man. But I think the identity for me, when I first started for a long time, I identified as a butch lesbian, or what we say in the Black community as a stud. Until, 2010 or so is when I started really thinking maybe there's something else to this, because I'm not butch. Obviously, at the end of the day, I'm not. But for a minute, I thought, well, in order for me to be a man and for people to respect me as a man and to use my he pronouns, I need to denounce everything feminine about me. And I need to move as far away from women. And anytime that anyone says she or her, when they refer to me, I need to be extremely angry and make them stop. And actually, I feel most free in this body that I'm in right now, understanding that there are some feminine parts to me, and I celebrate them.
I think the future will be more fluid, you hope?
I think it's already more fluid. There's so many people who I know who won't pick one side or the other, the non-binary folks, or gender non-conforming or whatever. I know so many people who are like, don't call me a woman, don't call me a man, call me a femme, call me masculine, call me this or that. So I see it changing already.
Yeah, I mean, I would really love to meet the people who love the binary.
Right.
Throughout their entire lifetimes.
Exactly.
It changes. All right, so the socialism, where did that come in and how does that relate? And tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing now. You've just come back from the UK.
Sure. So I think socialism for me is about, at the end of the day, I feel like I've had a hard life, but at this end of it, I have access to a whole lot of privilege. And, I basically can eat and live and sleep and kind of move very freely. I'm still Black and trans, but obviously I can move a lot freely than a lot of other people. And so I feel like my fight for socialism, and the thing that is important to me, is I want everyone to have access to that.
Now, a lot of people watching this, don't have a lot of clear models of what socialism is. Mm-hmm. And the models they have are models like Cuba or the Soviet Union, where I can hear them now saying, well, they were not nice to trans people, or it took them a long time to get their head around homophobia and the relationship between capitalism and homophobia. Mm-hmm. So when you say socialism, what are you thinking of? What do you mean? And is there a state expression of that anyplace?
Yeah, I don't think that 21st socialism in the United States is going to look like anything that's been done already. I think that when when I really think of socialism, I'm thinking of it as kind of like a vehicle to something else that's more permanent. And so I see us doing the things that are alternate to like austerity. So like the idea for us as Freedom Road, and me even personally, is more of, we need folks, and I think we do take these examples from Cuba and Venezuela and other places, we need folks to actually understand what political moment we're in. And so it's about finding people, making sure that they are educating us and we're educating them so that we understand the climate and what needs to happen to shift it. And I think I see a lot of people doing that through what's been called like independent political organizations. And you see those kind of popping up everywhere, but it's really like these mass groups going out and finding people and then getting educated together and then electing our own folks to put in office, and not in just a way where it's like, you know, find a progressive woman or a black face and put them in office, but like people who are actually coming up through those organizations, through the ranks with us, who share our politics, who are willing to fight for us.
I think about it a lot as sort of putting the social at the center as opposed to capital at the center.
Right.
And what would we do if we organized the state on that basis? So we're running out of time. I haven't heard much about the British experience. What did you take away from that trip? And then I guess my last question would be for you to share some comments about what you think are priorities for people in this country right now.
Sure. I think the biggest thing that I took away was the different experience of what it is to be black in London and in the UK versus what it is to be black in the United States.
How so?
Black people in the UK, for one, I never really heard anyone say like, I'm black. I heard people say I'm Somali or I'm Jamaican or, you know, I'm whatever the name of their country or their parents' country was, and kind of wearing it as like this badge of honor and really being connected to their culture in a way that I feel like Black Americans are connected, but we don't talk about it in the same way. In particular, me, I know a lot of my time I was spending before London talking about the Black American experience based on the amount of oppression that I receive. And I think being in London, but also traveling to and from with the U.S. passport really helped me understand how much privilege having that U.S. passport gives me, and really being able to move freely while I watch so many other people get held up from being able to move. And so it really made me feel like my responsibility and the responsibility of other folks who are here in the U.S. Is also about making sure that we are current about what's happening everywhere else, but also being engaged in that fight to make sure that like it shouldn't be different if I have a U.S. passport or if my passport is Syrian or if it's French or whatever. We should all be able to move freely.
And what about the priority question, especially for people who perhaps aren't fortunate enough to live in the kind of community that you've described or haven't made that for themselves yet?
I think two priorities. I think one, the biggest priority is resistance at this point. Like I think all kinds of resistance. It doesn't even. I'm just so proud of folks on the left and in general right now for the level of resistance that we've kept up since inauguration. And I think keep going, keep finding creative ways to resist this administration. But I think also we can't get caught up in just resisting. We also have to be on the offense.
So do I hear a book in the offing? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I don't have time for a book. But some people should write them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's great talking with you. You can find out more at our website. That's lauraflanders.com.